Welcome to Get Naked with Dr. Kate. I'm your host, Dr. Kate Balestrieri, a Beverly Hills-based psychologist, certified sex therapist, and the founder of Modern Intimacy. Thanks for joining me here where I talk about sex, relationships, mental health, and dive into your questions with practical answers and real solutions. Each week, I share insights aimed at helping you build an authentic and healthy relationship with yourself, with others, and with your sexuality. It's time to get naked, emotionally, mentally, and on your own time, physically. Welcome back, everyone. Today, I am so thrilled to have with me as a guest the TikTok sensation, Caylee Cresta. Her @Caylee Cresta TikTok account has gained 2.8 million followers and over 46 million likes. And her channel originally consisted of makeup and comedy videos before eventually shifting over to sharing her thoughts on women and relationships in society. Caylee is a social media personality on a mission to empower women. And with a prior career in a male-dominated industry of construction, she was originally inspired by the communication barrier she found between men and women and set out to translate the plight of everyday women like herself in an effort to help couples reconnect and to help women see more clearly what they may be feeling. And it was with this content shift that Caylee found her passion and became determined to describe every facet of the female experience in hopes of making her fellow women know that they weren't alone and to feel understood. Caylee is often praised for her ability to articulate really tough topics, and she does so with an epically blunt demeanor and a comedic twist. I love it. And Caylee is thrilled to be able to laugh with some of these really serious subjects with all of her followers and really highlight the fact that none of us are isolated in this. It's really universal. Caylee has a young son. She's a cat lover and enjoys playing with makeup when she's not fighting misogynists. Caylee, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so grateful to be here and have this conversation with you.
Likewise, your page is one that I go to so frequently, I mean daily, and I go there when I need a laugh, I go there when I need to commiserate, and I go there when I really want to be reminded of what it looks like to be really empowered and to boldly and unapologetically call shit out, because it's hard to do sometimes when you're so weighed down by all of what we see every single day. So I'd love to hear, just like for you, you become quite a phenomenon, and I'd love to hear just how it got started in your words.
So I spent my career in general construction. So I was a director of operations in public construction, which is obviously a very male-dominated field. And I always kind of found it ironic that some of the men that I saw all the time would constantly talk about, they wished that their wives would shut up and their wives were always nagging them. And that was really the narrative that I heard from all of these men that I was talking to regularly. And then, maybe it would be someone that I hadn't seen in 6 months, or even someone I was seeing regularly would say, my wife doesn't say anything to me. We don't have sex. We don't, nothing. There's no conversation. And I would go, I thought you wanted her to shut up. You were complaining that she was nagging and she wouldn't be quiet. And now you're mad that she's not talking and you're confused about why you're not having sex. And that's where, I guess this was kind of born, was how do we communicate this, right? Because I think it can be really tough when you're in the relationship yourself, right? They're not listening to understand one another when they're arguing. They're just waiting for what to say next, right? It's this tit for tat and this competition, if you will, when people are arguing. And so something that I really tried to do was, how can I create content that maybe a wife could send to her husband, much like the husbands that I was coming into contact with daily, that would maybe start a much needed conversation.
Well, I love that. And one of the first videos that you did was to address this nagging piece, right? And it kind of went viral because it's so relatable, as someone who works with couples so frequently in my practice, it's one of the things that I hear about the most, right? Men come in and they're like, my wife won't stop nagging or won't shut up about XYZ. And we really have to work hard to break down all of those defenses. And a lot of the men don't understand where their wives are coming from and that this is actually a bid for connection. And I love that you highlighted that in your video. Can you say a little bit about that?
Well, because being a woman myself, I could relate to that. And I think a lot of times what we do is we say what we're feeling to someone that we care about. And because we don't get the answer that we want, and I want to be really careful that that's not misinterpreted, because it's not about getting what you want, but it's about feeling heard,
Right.
feeling like someone at least cares enough to listen to what you're saying. And when that doesn't happen, when we're constantly brushed off every time we are communicating what we're feeling, we shut down and we say, okay, well, I'm not going to say anything because it doesn't do any good when I do. And that's a huge problem with, I think, women, is we go numb, right? We really start to grieve relationships while we're still in them. We don't wait until
Mhm.
after they're over, because society, we're really brought up that if a family fails, it's our fault. If a relationship fails, it's our fault. And because we're tasked with keeping that family together, and that's really what I tried to put into words.
Right. Women are given that task, and it's such a task of inequity when you have a partner who doesn't understand that what you're trying to do is create cohesion. And that cohesion is developed through understanding each other, caring about each other's perspectives, understanding the plea for some sort of showing up, if you will, right? And I love what you said. It's not that a woman is trying to get the specific answer that she wants to hear. And that's a place where I think a lot of men go. They say what they think their partner wants to hear to get their partner to stop nagging, but then they don't follow through on that because it was never an agreement they could sustain. And then we have the same argument coming up over and over again. And men are feeling frustrated because they said they would do the thing, or they said what they thought she wanted to hear. Can't she just stop XYZ? And this is a place where a lot of couples get stuck because a lot of men don't understand that their partners want to be treated with equity and respect. And when you have a partner who's not hearing you, not seeing you, that protesting gets really loud. And that's what the nagging is. It's a protesting. And I've said this before on the podcast, and I'll say it again because it's so frequent. But when our protesting doesn't work, then we start grieving. And when our grieving no longer, when there's nothing left to grieve, then we start detaching. And that is what women often do in relationships long before they ever leave. So by the time they leave, they're completely detached and ready to go. And men are like, wait a minute, it wasn't that serious. I don't understand. Why can't we still work on this? And she's sort of like, I gave it everything and I've got no more tears and no more energy. It's time to go. And that can be really hard.
Yeah, and I think it's so brilliant what you said. When somebody says something that they can't sustain, and that's what happens when you're trying to shut somebody up instead of trying to actually fix that relationship and create a partnership that really does work. And it's where
Mhm.
most people get stuck. And I love the way you said that.
Hmm. So when did you start to see your content catch on? Right, you have almost 3 million followers now. Like, when did it really get momentum, and what was that like for you?
It was, I would say, probably like a year and a half ago. Don't quote me on that. I should know the answer to that. Um, but the thing that, see, right away, I started getting some really, really bad hate in every way that you could imagine: letters, emails. But more importantly, I saw so many women in my comments saying that they finally felt understood, or they felt seen, or this helped them to initiate a really important conversation. Um, and to me, that was the most rewarding thing that I had ever experienced in my life. And it was something that just immediately drew me and I became so passionate about. And it really did. It changed the course of my life in a lot of ways, obviously.
Do you still have your job in the construction field, or have you changed paths as a result of this?
So I've changed paths as a result of this as of about probably 6 months ago. Um, and that was really, really wild for me because to be able to create a career out of something that brings me so much joy and that I'm so passionate about. Um, Not that I didn't love my job before, but it's a completely different world when you're waking up every day to contribute to something that you really believe is making a difference. And it's something that I'm so grateful for every day. You know, a lot of people will ask how I deal with the hate that I get, and that's it. Because you know, at the end of the day, that doesn't make much of a difference to me. But seeing that somebody feels more understood makes a difference that matters.
I love that. I love that you have so much passion for this, and I hear it in the content that you make. I mean, your voice is so uh, it's so direct, and I wonder. You've mentioned the hate, but I wonder you make content that I imagine is so confronting for many men and even for many women who hear it and don't necessarily want to look at their relationship and see the reality of things. So being as confronting as it is, even though you're very much calling people in my opinion, um, let's talk a little bit about some of the most favorable and excitable, relatable responses that you get, and then also some of the hate. What does it consist of?
So I would say that you know the majority of the hate has also it's always kind of funny to me, right? Because we think of when we create anything, right? We don't know who exists on the other end. And
Mhm.
so what I always find funny is that I don't know that that is true for that specific man until he comes into my comments and starts insulting me. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm not calling you out. You're calling yourself out. You're the one that just told me that this applies to you. I didn't know before you came. Um, and it's always something that I find very frustrating is I'll get these big long emails from men and they'll be arguing with me about why this isn't true. Meanwhile, their wife sent them a piece of content and said, "This is how I feel." So your
Right.
wife has validated that those are her feelings and that this is in fact true. I, as a fellow woman, have told you that this is true. And rather than talking to your wife and having the very needed conversation that she was obviously seeking to have with you, you chose to come and argue with the content creator in her emails. And to me, that's kind of um, a really brilliant example of what the problem is in relationships altogether is that rather than listening and saying, okay, this is obviously a problem, you're arguing why your partner's feelings aren't valid.
Right.
And so to me, that's a little bit of like a phenomenon that we see. And when it comes to the positive responses, it's very much just I couldn't put this into words. This finally puts it into words for me. And I think that that can be a really big problem with women is because we've been told to sit down and stay quiet. It can feel really validating when we see someone stand up and be loud.
Absolutely. And as I mentioned before, you're really unapologetic, and I love that about your content. You are bold, you are not shy, and I think there's a really oh there's a power in that most women really want to find in themselves. They have it, but they've been conditioned away from it for so long. And I think your words and your delivery do really give them strength to start these hard conversations. And your POV is really comedic in many ways. It's biting at times, but it's never really super angry, and there's no "I hate men" vibes, at least not that I hear at all. It's really a passion to shine a light on these societally built-in misogynistic behaviors in relationships. And I wonder about, like, how did you finesse that voice? How did you come to, like, really hone in your delivery? How did you do that?
So, one, and thank you. I'm so grateful that you said, you don't get an "I hate men" vibe. And that
Yeah.
means a lot to me because I don't hate men. I
Yeah.
have some amazing men in my life, which is how I know that men can do better and be better.
Hmm.
And it comes from a place of, I'm the mother to a young son, of knowing what men are capable of being. Um, Patriarchy doesn't help men, right? These really angry men that make content about how women only care about money and they need to be high value. That's not helping men. That's not encouraging men to be in touch with what they feel. And so, in from that perspective, I was able to hone it because it's what I believe. And
Mm.
um as far as the comedy portion, um, I am somebody that's always found it easier to laugh at myself, right? We have so many things that make us so uncomfortable to talk about because we've been told that we shouldn't. So, something like how saggy my boobs are after breastfeeding, right? Yeah, it's really, we've been told we shouldn't talk about this stuff. So I think if we can
Mm.
laugh at it together, it kind of takes some of that pressure off. And the fact
Mhm.
that, it's a conversation that makes us feel tense and that makes us, as you said, shy away from those tough conversations. And maybe if we can laugh our way into them, we can start to have them more openly.
I love that. I mean, doing that really just introduces your humanity into the mix, right? And when we introduce our own humanity, other people can get in touch with yours and their own. And it's a great empathy building tool, right? When we can just show up authentically.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, of your posts, I'm curious if there's one or two that have garnered you the most positive feedback or the most negative feedback. And what are the topics?
So I would say the most negative was I was stitching a woman who, there's a lot of them, but let's say one comes to mind. I was stitching a woman who was responding to a man, and she said that we are done with being men's mothers.
Mm.
And this man was so angry, and he had responded saying a few things. Primarily, one, that no one was going to want a woman with that kind of attitude. And um, he was, what was funny to me about that is we have a man criticizing a woman for saying what she wants while he's talking about what he doesn't want. So right there, we see
Right.
this imbalance of
Yeah.
him, freely talking about what he doesn't want while criticizing this woman for doing the same. And I said in the video, I don't know why you would be angry that women don't want to be your mother unless you wanted to be treated like their child. And oh my God, did I make the men angry with that comment? Um, and I think it's probably because men are told that they have to be so strong in this
Yeah.
perspective of masculinity that they have for themselves. And when you break it down bare bones, it's something that didn't feel so good to them. Um, I
Yeah.
got hate for probably weeks over that, like
Oh
death
gosh.
threats,
Oh,
uh, all sorts of things, like pretty bad.
wow.
Um,
How does that affect you?
I think it probably bothered me a little bit more at the beginning. If I
Mhm.
told you that it never bothered me, I would be lying.
Mm.
it was tough to adjust to seeing so many angry people. In our day-to-day life, we don't come in contact with that much anger.
Mm-hmm.
We may see it as a one-off, or maybe we'll receive it from one person if we're in some abusive relationships. But to see it come from so many people was something that was very tough. I was going to ask you, actually, I mean, when you first got into your work, I mean, was
Mm-hmm.
that tough for you to hear the inner workings of someone's mind and realize that that really exists? I would love to know that.
It was jarring at first. When I first became a psychologist, I was doing a lot of work in correctional facilities with convicted sex offenders. And the things that those men would say to me when they were confronted with their shame was pretty jarring at times. And I'm so grateful to the security staff at the facilities where I worked, because there were many threats made to me, including threats of sexual violence and death. And it highlighted for me a phenomenon that you talked about just a minute ago, which is that men typically, this is a generalization, but what the research shows us is that men tend to externalize blame and responsibility for their feelings and for their distress, whereas women tend to internalize blame and responsibility, meaning women blame themselves and men blame whoever they claim is, quote, making them feel a certain way. And because men are so shepherded away from their own emotional experience, feelings like shame are not an emotion that many men can sit with a lot of tolerance. So it very quickly converts into anger and rage and panic. And in a panic to get out of that feeling, they quickly try to annihilate in their mind, or sometimes through physical behavior, the threat, right? And that threat often is a woman telling them about themselves and holding up a mirror to something that they've been working really hard not to see. And men, I really feel for them. They've been told they can't really feel that way, or they're considered weak or pathetic or not a man. And to have that kind of bind where you don't actually get to be who you are if you admit to certain emotions, I think is a real existential threat for many men. So it makes sense to me that their emotional process of protection goes so quickly to that vitriol. But it's not an effective long-term strategy. And of course, it results in real world consequences for them and for any victims of that rage.
Right. And this is what to me is so fascinating about conversations like this is, I'm working strictly off observation and my own experiences, and you not only having the observations and your own experiences, but also the research and the work that you're doing daily. And I think it's so fascinating to kind of put that all together, and the way that you see it really come together. As you said, women, we blame ourselves, and men blame, what is externally causing them that discomfort. And it's what makes me so sad sometimes when I see that if men would just sit back and say, okay, so we're talking about something that makes me uncomfortable, but that if they were to deal with, we're talking about healthier, happier men, healthier,
Yes.
happier women, and a
Mm-hmm.
healthier and happier society together. And that's what is so frustrating for me at
Yeah.
times. And I assume something that's really tough for you when you're sitting in a position to want to just help people.
Absolutely. I mean, I also have a lot of empathy for whomever is struggling to take accountability with something, because that resistance to accountability that usually shows up in the form of dismissiveness or invalidation, their psyche is working so hard to protect them from all of the shame that comes with knowing, oh shit, I fucked up, right? That is not a feeling that anyone really likes to sit in or wear, but it's necessary to have healthy, intimate relationships, whether it's between men and women or men and other men, women and women, right? Accountability is what shores up trust in a relationship. And so when a partner gets super defensive and there's no validation of some of the other partner's subjective truth, that just perpetuates the problem and creates a wider chasm from which these partners now need to repair. And so that chasm just keeps getting wider and wider and wider the more there is defensiveness and self-protection. And as easy as that is to conceptualize, it's so challenging for folks to do in the moment when they have that mirror held up to their faces, which is the relationship and the feedback that they're getting that's so incongruent with how they want to see themselves. So it's hard. And working with couples, this is probably the trickiest place where they get stuck.
Right, right. And I think, it also kind of leads us to see how I think a lot of times women we're very concerned about preventing something before it happens.
Yeah.
I don't want to hate you. I don't want to fall out of love with you. I
Yeah.
don't want to not be attracted to you. And so we try and talk before these really big things happen. And I think men tend to want to have the conversation when they're trying to undo damage that is suddenly affecting them. So, oh, we're not having sex. How do I make her happier? Where you could have had the conversation. And and again, I know there's a lot that goes into that. I'm not, blaming men in this moment solely. It's something that they've been conditioned. It's something that, they
Right.
have not been taught or even given the tools and resources to really work through these emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, they don't quite see that those are the things that we're trying to initiate a lot of the times.
Yeah. I also think that many men, of course, not all men, see these different, I'll call them misattunements in their relationship as one off events, right? My partner doesn't want to have sex with me. What do I need to do in this moment to get her to want to have sex with me? But they sort of miss the tapestry of disappointment that builds with all of these misattunements, and it becomes this underlying thread of the relationship that's really hard to untangle with just one good, I don't want to call it a good deed, that sounds so performative, but one attunement that aligns, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you said something earlier about the video that you made about men not, or women not wanting to be men's mothers. I don't think a lot of men really understand how quickly that can happen when they are not doing their share of the emotional labor in a relationship or the domestic labor in a relationship. And they give away their power by making their partner their mom, and then they try really hard then to try to get that power back, usually through initiating some passive aggressive power grab or negative control kind of behavior. And they don't really realize they're doing it a lot of the time, but they end up just in these big power struggles that also makes it really tricky to have partners feel seen and like they're on the same team.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it was kind of an interesting, just before our conversation, I had gotten a comment from a woman who said, um, I had to turn off your video because my husband said, stop watching her. She makes you think.
Oh, what a
And,
compliment to you.
right? That's true. I like the way you framed it better. Um, and I sat there and said, isn't it interesting that he didn't say, stop listening to her, she's wrong. Stop listening. Stop listening to her, she makes you think. And I thought that that was very indicative of the way that women start to accept their situation even if they're not happy with it, right? This
Mhm.
tolerable level of misery. And rather
Yes.
than say, I'm not willing to be miserable, I don't want to be miserable, we say, okay, well, this is the situation and we better adapt to it. And,
Yeah.
I love something that you said just a minute ago about men. They feel as though, okay, they have sex, and now, taking a step further and building off what you're saying, and now they think everything's fixed, right?
Right.
Everything's okay, because the goal was, why doesn't she want to have sex with me? She did have sex with me, and now everything has been fixed and we're back to normal.
Right.
And, the reason I bring these things up together is because I think a lot of women, once again, will say, okay, if we have sex, he'll stop with this passive aggressiveness, as you mentioned. He'll stop with these things that are causing me pain. And that makes us detach from sex altogether. So this intimate
Mhm.
connection that's meant to bring us together starts to become a chore, starts to become
Yeah.
something that we associate with, I need to get over this hump in order for
Yeah.
him to be kinder. And that's a problem.
It is. It's in many cases it's overt coercion, right? And in some cases it's more covert. It's not the intention of a male
Right.
partner to be coercive, but the moodiness or the guilt that comes up, or the little comments about how infrequently they have sex that are passive aggressive, things like that, that does create a context of obligation. And I mean, anyone who's experienced this can attest to it, but when you feel like sex is an obligation, your desire for it goes way down. And we have all the research to support that. And I really don't think that a lot of men understand the way that that influences their female partners' overall picture of desire toward them. And it creates a disconnection between her experience of sex with him and her experience of pleasure within her own body. A lot of women sort of check out and dissociate when they're in a position of feeling obligated to be sexual. And male partners go in and they're excited. They're getting to have sex, so they don't understand the disconnect. And it's a real problem.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And it must be really interesting, from your, and also, as you said, you have so much empathy for your clients. So I'm sure also something that's very sad, seeing when people come to you. Unfortunately, I don't think a lot of people seek out therapy when they're still in a good place, right? They don't look at it as kind of this upkeep of the mind in the way that I think we should as a society. And so I'm sure by the time they've made the step to come into the office as a couple, there's already a breakdown, and it must be
Mhm.
very hard to try and piece that back together with all those different facets.
Yeah, it can be. It can be. Depending on how much tolerance each partner has to feel the hard feelings and how they help each other regulate through the hard moments. And if couples can do that, they can really get through a lot, pretty much everything. But where couples often struggle is exactly that. They struggle to stay connected when they're in conflict, and they start fighting against each other instead of joining as allies against the bigger problem. But I wonder, you have such a positive view on relationships and on how to have healthy relationships. And you mention in your content frequently that you have an 8-year-old son. So, how do you teach him to look at women, and how do you model for him kind of a way to be?
So, one thing that I really try to do regularly, and I have to say, he is such a good little boy with so much empathy, and I am very, very lucky in that way. But I try to constantly have these conversations with him. Not having 20-year-old conversations with my 9-year-old, but I do try to have the basics, if you will, right? So
Mhm.
um, it was funny. I took him to a public bathroom, and he said something, after he used the bathroom, I was like, okay, now you stand there. And I hung up my purse and I took down my onesie and I took off my sweater. And he goes, oh, I'm so happy I'm a boy. And that initiated a really important conversation, because okay, yes, here's a perfect example of, there can be some more labor associated with being a woman, but at the same time, here's all the really great things about being a woman. Here's the really great things about being a man. And how can we complement each other? Not that we have to, but when we're in the position to complement one another, here's all the ways that we can. So I try to be very, very honest with him, um, and have the conversations that I feel are needed to develop empathy. And I really try to encourage him to feel his emotions. And
Mm.
sometimes we'll have a conversation at the end of the day. Okay, um, was somebody mean, or was somebody mean to another person? What could have caused that? What could you do to help the person that was maybe on the other end of that anger? And I think those are the tools that we need to be teaching men when they're young.
I agree. I agree. You're really open about being a mom on in your content, but you've never really addressed the questions about your own personal relationship status. And I remember seeing a video of yours where you so beautifully articulated that women shouldn't need to declare if they're in a relationship or declare that they're married to vet themselves or to establish credibility. And I so appreciate that position, because I do think that it's something that a lot of men will look to either, well, to discredit you one way or another, right? But
Right.
I I appreciate that position. I wonder if, I mean, there's a lot of curiosity about your relationship status. I wonder if you're open to talking about it at all.
Yes, so I will definitely tell you the answer to that secret. So um, it's funny because I've been with the same man for 13 years.
Mm.
Um, and he's wonderful. So I don't share my family on social media. Um, when I started, I was not intentionally hiding him. But what happened was I heard people say, "Oh, this is why you're single. This is why you're single."
Mm.
And
Mm.
as you mentioned, I feel that a woman's marital status should not come into question. Um, and we shouldn't need to be married to be validated or for our voice to matter. And
Mhm.
so I didn't start hiding it, but I said, okay, this is kind of interesting. And I'm going to, not that I hide it, I just never address it, because I don't want women to ever sit here and say, okay, my voice is less important because I'm not married. It doesn't matter. We've all had our experiences in relationships, and
Right.
whether they failed or they succeeded is not necessarily any reflection of the person that was in it. It takes just as much strength to walk away from something as it does to stay in something that's worth staying in. So now I always find it interesting. I will get comments that say, "This is why you're single," or "Your husband must be miserable," right? I get the qualifier. So he is, my partner is a combat vet. Um, he's 6'4". He does not look like a marshmallow, but he is very much a marshmallow. And we have a very reverse gender role. He is a stay-at-home parent, which he does wonderful. I am not very good at things like cleaning and all of that. He's very good at them. And the second we took the gender out of the equation and said what works for our family, um, we found what truly did work, and it's why I'm so passionate about what I am.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate you being so open about it. I wonder how has it affected your relationship? You getting more and more popularity with this kind of content, and what kinds of conversations are happening between you and your partner around some of the topics that you bring up and some of the feedback that you get around it?
So, we always kind of laugh because sometimes, like, I'll lay on his chest at night and read all these "this is why you're single" comments, which is always kind of fun. Um, I've had some incidents where I've met men in public who it's been very violent. So,
Mm.
he drives me a lot of places now. Those things have kind of shifted, as, people recognize me more and more. But everything I talk about online is something that I've always been very passionate about and that he's very much on board with. So it never creates tension. I think he's just really happy to see me do something that makes me happy. But I think he worries about me a little bit more with some of the vitriol that's directed towards me sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, I hear that. My partner's expressed similar concerns. There's like this duality of celebrating the strength and of your voice, and my partner of my voice, but also a real fear for some of the real difficulties that can be presented. I'm so sorry to hear that you've had real like violence in your life as a
Oh,
result.
yeah, and I just, similar to what we talked about with the hate comments, we just have to sit there and really say, okay, well, we're making a positive difference. And
Yeah.
with that, I guess will always come negative. So,
True, unfortunately. Um, so you have so many great posts. I want to just bring one up that I thought really hit the mark. You talked about a specific post where men were so concerned about their partner letting themselves go. Let me see if I
mhm.
can find it. Yes, you responded to a video of men sitting at a table saying that he would leave his wife if she ever let herself go. And your reaction was so beautiful and so blunt. And it got a lot of surprising comments from people of all genders. Some women even said, yes, he should leave me if I let myself go. And others sent your post to their husbands and they had really robust conversations. I'm so curious about just like what was it like for you to see that video and making that reply?
So it was funny when I remember seeing the video that I replied to. I literally can remember when I first saw it and being so just I was so angry, right? Because it's
Yeah.
something that, once again, as you put into words so beautifully, the way that we internalize the
Mm-hmm.
responsibility of so many things, um, and how we take accountability for it ourselves. So it's something that we already stress about, right? When we have
Mm-hmm.
children, we worry about our husband no longer being attracted to us and what's going to happen to our body and stretch marks and all of these different things that happen, which to me are all such beautiful things and such celebrations of how powerful the female body is, right?
Yeah.
um and so when I made it, I was very spicy, if you will. I was very I definitely kept that anger in there, which I tend to usually wait until I've calmed down and I'm feeling a little bit more rational. But I was just very like, everything that's happening, or we're still bleeding, we're still everything that's happening, our boobs are leaking, all of these different things. And I was so surprised to see women admitting to internalizing that. Yes, if I let myself go, he should leave me. That is my responsibility. And to see, we hear the words internalized misogyny thrown around a lot. And
Mm-hmm.
when you truly see it, it can be very jarring to see women still struggling with this unrealistic expectation. And I always try to think, what does that lead that woman to see when she looks in the mirror and sees her body changing? Um,
Yeah.
and so that was kind of what was in my mind when I was filming it. And the comments, the spectrum was so diverse. But what really stuck out to me was how many women said, I just feel so empowered after seeing this. And yes, my body is miraculous and amazing, and I should be proud of that.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I was so grateful when I saw that video of yours because it's a concern that I think every woman I've ever spoken to has articulated in some way, shape, or form. And it's because of women like you with the platform that you have really calling this stuff out and showing the empathy for how amazing the female body is and celebrating it and also showing the anger about how ridiculous it is to say something like that. I mean, if that's the agreement of a marriage, that you're going to be together and be physically perfect specimens, and that is the agreement you make, okay, fine. If that's a conscious agreement that's important to you both, great, more power to you. But that's not what a lot of folks are signing up for. So to hear the way that women can be so easily discarded, right? After going through a process that creates this gift of life, right, is just, it's heartbreaking.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I am so grateful again for you coming on the podcast. Thank you. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you really want a chance to go over or talk about together?
No, I just want to reiterate that it's really wonderful to have conversations and to bring such different things. And there's so many valuable. Your work is so valuable. And as I said, just to echo the fact that, I'm working from a place of observation, and of course you bring your own observations, but the statistics and the data and the work that you do and the work that you do to heal people, right? Whether that be as an individual or a couple. And that's so important. And I just want to thank you because you do such important work. And I loved hearing, where you started and in correctional facilities. And I think that's amazing. So thank you for everything that you do.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for all that you do and everything that you're bringing to this conversation in our collective. It is so needed. Where can folks reach you if they want to work with you or if they want to follow your content?
I am at Caylee Cresta everywhere, CayleeCresta. I started longer form content on YouTube, if you want to hear my voice even more. And I think that's it.
Amazing. What's next for you in this work?
There's so many bigger things that I want to do, which is why YouTube was kind of the logical next step, kind of making these bigger, longer conversations. And I hope that will expand, somewhere into traditional media. I think I would always straddle social media because I love the way that we're able to connect with individual people. Mm-hmm. But I hope some bigger things are coming. And that's kind of what I'm working towards.
Amazing. I hope so too. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. We will see you next week. Thank you for listening to Get Naked with Dr. Kate. Stay connected with me on Instagram and TikTok at Dr. Kate Balestrieri. Everyone has questions, and I want to answer as many as I can. So feel free to email your questions to question@getnakedpodcast.com. If you're looking for a free 30-minute consultation with me or someone on my team, visit modernintimacy.com. And don't forget to join our newsletter, Modern Intimacy, on Substack. Let's meet back here next week. A new episode drops every Tuesday. Disclaimer, this podcast is not a substitute for therapy and does not constitute a professional relationship with Dr. Kate Balestrieri or Modern Intimacy. This podcast is strictly for education and entertainment purposes only.